What's up, guys? It's MugenLord here, and I would have to say this. Just last week, man, the game community has been in a fritz. I would have to say that is because we had Sony with the PS5 Pro, which really had the community going back and forth. I mean, console wars is pretty much still alive, surprisingly. When you have the PC, you also have Sony and Microsoft fanboys going back and forth when it comes to mid-generation consoles. And then, on the other side of things, you also have Nintendo trying to sue Pocket Pair, the developers behind Power World. We want to wait and see how that goes, and we're going to take a deep dive and talk about that sometime this week. And then, of course, Square Enix right now. Just last week, Square Enix had made an announcement that it didn't meet expectations in terms of profits when it comes to Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So before we even dive into this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for more gaming content here on this channel. Now, you already know my opinions when it comes to Final Fantasy XVI and the Final Fantasy VII remake trilogy. You already know where I stand with this, but this has been the two most divisive Final Fantasy games in a very, very long time, especially with this current generation. So it also makes sense why it didn't meet expectation when it comes to profits, but it's also still a lot deeper than that, because there is some management issues going on and a lot of things going on when it comes to their HR department, when it comes to their DEI and diversity inclusion and all that other type of stuff. But we want to get into it after this. We read this article when it says Square Enix admits Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did not meet our expectations. Now, Square Enix has finally made public its dissatisfaction with Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's commercial performance, admitting neither game met profit expectations. In a financial results briefing held May 13th by only released today, September 18th, Takashi Kiryu, president and representative director of Square Enix, said, "In the HD game sub-segment, we released multiple new titles, including major titles such as Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but profits unfortunately did not meet our expectations." And I said this. A lot of people kept saying, "Oh man, no, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is doing phenomenal. Final Fantasy XVI it did phenomenal, it's successful and everything." But let me tell you something about game developers and game companies in general. When they know they have a success, they brag about those numbers really, really early. They make sure to put those numbers out there as soon as possible because they want to flex. And Square Enix has been very, very quiet when it comes to the performance of both Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth when they first came out within the first couple of months. They've been very quiet about it. They haven't talked about it, and we always have to hear speculations, or we have to hear rumors, or we have to hear from inside sources that Square Enix weren't satisfied when it came to the sales of both of these Final Fantasy titles. Now they're actually coming out and saying that it didn't meet expectations. Now, Kiryu went on to suggest that Square Enix cannibalized sales of Final Fantasy games releasing during the financial year ending of 2024. Now, I'm wondering what titles was that exactly. It says, "We recognize that issues remain in the digital entertainment segment," Kiryu admitted. "The HD game segment failed to be better its profitability, posting operation losses in every year of our previous midterm plans. In addition to this, we did not manage our title portfolio across the company as well as we could have, which I believe resulted in opportunity losses due to cannibalism between our own titles." And this is what I said before. Remember what I said that back in, I believe, 2022, that Square Enix had so many AA titles, it was just hard to keep up with. Now, fortunately, I'm blessed enough to be able to go out and buy titles as they are released. And these titles that I'm mentioning, remember, we had a Live remake, followed by Diofield Chronicles, and then after that, we had Valkyrie Elysium, and then Star Ocean: The Divine Force. These titles came out back to back. These are like spread months apart from each other. Didn't even give them a chance to breathe. And then sadly and unfortunately, a lot of these titles are going to be overlooked because one title is going to be better than the other. One title is going to overshadow another title. So it didn't give these titles a chance to breathe. And then when that happens, which is sad to say, is when they see these sales and see these losses, they're going to say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't try this at all, you know? And then now you look at this year, we also have Visions of Mana, We also have this year Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And then the year before that, we had Final Fantasy 16. So we have a lot of these titles, but these are pretty much more spread apart, but these are actually, like, I would consider major titles. And then we can't forget about Foam Stars that also released, which was also a live service game. So there's a whole lot of factors that contribute to this, but we're going to continue. So it says Square Enix released Final Fantasy 16 in June of 2023, then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it's over half a year later in February 2024. Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth both launched as PS5 exclusives, and while Square Enix has announced the sales figures for Final Fantasy 16, it has yet to do so for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which should tell you something. It should definitely tell you something, because we talked about before that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth failed to capture what Final Fantasy VII Remake did when Final Fantasy VII Remake had first launched. So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth had a slower start compared to Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I have a feeling that when it comes to the third part to Final Fantasy, it's going to probably make less than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because now the audience has already been split and divided after Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then you go into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where people seeing the things that they don't like about it, they're going to pretty much fade away. So then whatever audience remains from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is going to carry over to the third. So I don't think that more people's going to instantly want to just dive in there in Final Fantasy 3, the third part of Final Fantasy VII Remake. But let's continue. The company has already announced a significant rework of its business as it fights for profitability. It has a new multi-platform plan that encompasses PC and potentially Xbox. Now you see potentially Xbox is because as we found out, is when it comes to Japanese JRPGs or just Japanese games in general, Xbox has a small install base in Japan, and when they design games and develop games, they take under consideration the Japanese audience. They design games for their audience first before they think about the West when it comes to in terms of releases. So if there isn't really install base for the Japanese audience, then they're not going to go over and develop games for the Xbox. But hopefully that changed. That's what they have potentially there. But they're definitely looking forward to the PC and having it hopefully launch day and date, which they definitely need to do. And the next console is, of course, Nintendo. You know Nintendo's gonna get a lot of Square stuff, and hopefully we get a whole lot more, especially when Nintendo Switch 2 is coming out. So hopefully we'll see Final Fantasy VII Remake or Final Fantasy 16 or any of those titles come over to the Nintendo Switch 2. I think that'll be a gangbuster. That would definitely sell for that platform. But it has also canceled a number of games, and Kiryu revealed taking steps to better curate its pipeline of games. In the case of the HD subset segment, sales of individuals games will remain the key variable, but we believe that we'll be able to exercise some degree of control over the volatility by carefully curating our pipeline over the next 3 years, Kiryu said. By also working steadily to improve our profitability, we intend to offset the weaknesses in SD games to achieve overall profitability. And that's another thing you also have to keep in mind when it comes to any of these business changes that Square Enix plan on making. We won't see this come into fruition in full effect until 3 to 5 years later. So whatever current things that they have right now that aren't canceled, we're not going to see that change, because these games are already in mid development or at the end of development. So this game is going to have to come out, because Square Enix have to write that off and also get some return back on their investments. But what I'm telling you right now is we won't see any significant changes or any shifts in their business plan until the next 3 to 5 years. So I just want you to just temper your expectations. So Square Enix has now extended the timelines for a portion of its pipeline, in part because of the massive amount of time required to develop HD games, and in part because we determined that we should rethink how best to deliver some of these titles we had under development to our customers, Kiryu revealed. Final Fantasy isn't the only Square Enix series struggling. Its Splatoon-style game, Foam Stars, also flopped and has since gone free to play. And now that it's free to play, I'm definitely gonna get Foam Stars dry, because there's no way in the world I was gonna put money down and to pay money to have access to Foam Stars. So now that it's free to play, I definitely want to give it a try, maybe give my thoughts and opinions on it as well. but Square Enix has just been dropping the ball altogether. So what's next for Square Enix? Square Enix has Kingdom Hearts 4, the third game in the Final Fantasy Remake trilogy, Dragon Quest 12 in the works, and in January, Final Fantasy 16 producer Yoshida said it might be time for a younger generation to lead the franchise in the helm of Final Fantasy 17. So yes, this is what I definitely want to discuss for a moment here. For one, a lot of people keep saying that it's wokeness and DEI that's destroying Square Enix. I also want to make this clear. Wokeness and DEI is only part of the problem, and in fact, I think it's a small part of the problem. You have to realize that Square Enix has been slipping and has been fucking up for years. Before this whole Sweet Baby Inc., these consulting agencies and everything like that, Square Enix has been dropping the ball left and right. Square Enix hasn't been the same company even after, I would say, and dare I say, after Final Fantasy XI, in my personal opinion. After Final Fantasy XI, Square Enix has been just dwindling as far as the brand and recognition that it used to have ever since, that era had officially ended. So I would say that, yes, Square Enix's biggest issues is their management. I think mismanagement is prioritize everything when it comes to why Square Enix is failing the way they're failing. It's mismanagement, bad business practices. Then I would say it would be the DEI and some of the wokeness that it has in there. Because as I said before, you can have woke elements in there, but if a bad game is a bad game, it's a bad game regardless if you have wokeness or anything. So you also have to keep that in mind. Because if you remove wokeness out of things, if the game is still bad, it's still bad. Wokeness still doesn't stop bad management and bad business decisions when it comes to managing teams and managing projects. So you also have to keep that in mind. And then of course their live service games, they are dropping the ball, like Final Fantasy 7, the Soldier battle royale game that came out and that failed, and I was looking forward to that. And the dumbest decision that they made, which I keep talking about, bad business decisions, is the fact is that if that game would have released on console, released it on PC, released it on the PS5, the Xbox Series X, and even the Nintendo Switch, since that game wasn't really like a high-powered game, if they would have put it on all platforms, I think that game could have made it. I really truly believe that game could have really could have survived the test of times, because it's Final Fantasy. Everybody loves Final Fantasy, and plus I'm not a battle royale guy, but since it's Final Fantasy 7, I would have given the game a try, and it has the Final Fantasy 7 elements in it to make it its own thing and make it more unique for the battle royale genre. If they would have did that, I think the game would have still been here to this very day. And then, of course, the CD of Final Fantasy NT, which is another game that they dropped the ball on. They really messed up with that game. That game could have been not only a game that is a call or a fan service to the fans of the Final Fantasy brand, but it could have been an esports competitive game if they would have put that much love and care and put it on all platforms, and also should have made it free to play from the start and focus on balancing the game and adding in the characters that people wanted for the game. There's a lot of things they could have done. Final Fantasy VII Remake, which we're going to talk about right now, if they would have just stuck to it just being a one-to-one with some additional content, flesh out the lore, and keep the Final Fantasy VII gameplay, like the remake gameplay. It didn't even have to have the turn-based, because in my personal opinion, Final Fantasy VII Remake is some of the best JRPG combats that I've experienced in a very long time. That hybrid ATB and also that freeform, action role-playing mixed together. So if anything, all they had to do is keep the same story, but add it to the story, added all the elements to it to flesh it out, and it would have felt like a new experience on top of the new gameplay, the visuals and everything. That would have brought more fans in. It wouldn't have divided the fans as it's doing right now. And then of course Final Fantasy 16. The problem with Final Fantasy 16, in my personal opinion, is that Final Fantasy 16 just jumped genres. It's not even a JRPG. It's more of an action game than anything. It's a character action game. They literally switched genres to the point where, what is Final Fantasy? You don't even know what Final Fantasy is anymore. And Square Enix went on the record and saying to themselves that they spent more time chasing trends instead of being trendsetters. And that's what they've done with this. I was excited for Final Fantasy 16. And I've played Final Fantasy 16. And there is some positive. There is some pros to it. But for me as a Final Fantasy fan, I had more cons with it. Is because it's trying to be everything that it's not. You have that, it's trying to be an action character game, which is mediocre at, when you have other games out there like Astral Chain. You know, you also have of course DMC, that does it a whole lot better than what Final Fantasy 16 is doing. And then they don't even have any of the JRPG elements, where you don't have any of the status effects, and even when it comes to equipment and equipping your character, and don't even have any party members on top of that. Forgot to mention about that. So it don't even have most of the RPG elements that people love with Final Fantasy. So it pretty much became a jack of all trades but a master of none. It's a mediocre character action game compared to with the others that's already out there that does it better. And that's the problem. And that divided a lot of players. And then on top of that, exclusivity. Like Square Enix isn't the brand juggernaut that it used to be, especially when it comes to Final Fantasy. It is not a juggernaut like it used to be. Final Fantasy doesn't bring people running to buy consoles like it used to. People are not lining up to play Final Fantasy games like they used to. Most of the younger generations don't even know what the fuck Final Fantasy is anymore, because of all the mishaps and mistakes that Square Enix has been making throughout the past couple years, or over a decade now. And this is where they're fucking up at. And then exclusivity doesn't even help it anymore, is because, you know, now you wait a year later, which now we have Final Fantasy 16 on the PC, and we're starting to get okay numbers, but they're not getting magnificent numbers. And that also has a lot to do is that people who already played it a year ago, they moved on. And then PC players, they're hopping onto it, they're playing it right now, but it's not garnering the hype that it should have garnered. So now Final Fantasy 17 is their biggest hope. They really have to knock it out of the park with Final Fantasy 17. When I say they gotta take it back to its roots, because Final Fantasy 16 was on the right track. We went back to classic fantasy type of genre with Final Fantasy. All they needed to do was a full-on party system, take the Final Fantasy VII Remake battle system, and then all they had to do was modify it, change it up, and then add a class system or something in there, and they would have had something. But Final Fantasy 17 really has to do it, and I would believe what Yoshida said is also right, that it's time for a younger generation. Let a younger generation come in and do something with it, because a lot of the young generations too have grown up playing the classic Final Fantasy games and know what they want in a Final Fantasy title. Let the young bloods come in, because the old heads clearly doesn't get it, or they're tired of making the same thing and want to try something new, and they're not landing it. They're not landing the spot. You know what I'm saying? But I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think about Square Enix and their decisions making over the past decade? You know, when it comes to the decisions, you know, are they, like, will they ever get that brand recognition that they used to be when you see the Square Enix label, that you know that you about to get high quality gaming experience, especially when it comes to JRPGs? And what changes can we expect moving forward? And what are your hopes for Final Fantasy 17? And what are your thoughts on the trilogy of Final Fantasy VII Remake and also Final Fantasy 16 now that it's out on the PC and now that you have your hands on the game? So definitely leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe button for more gaming content here on this channel. This is MugenLord signing off. I'll see you game fiends later. Peace out.